Hello and welcome to the Intel Brief. Today is Monday, the 2nd of March. I'm your host Daniel, and today we're going to talk about Operation Epic Fury. It's going to be update 3. So the information cutoff date for this update is 07:45 GMT, or about 20 minutes ago. So firstly, Israel and the US has continued to strike Tehran as Iranian media reports fresh blasts within the city. So the IDF and the US, outside of this report, said that it's continuing to conduct strikes on Tehran as Iranian media reported. The Israeli Air Force, guided by IDF intelligence, has begun an additional wave of strikes against the Iranian regime within the heart of Tehran. They posted on Telegram. I think, there's lots of videos of it. It's pretty clear they're continuing their strikes, continuing to try and degrade the regime, particularly recently targeting the internal ministry. Next, the Gulf and Arab states have condemned the Iranian aggression and emphasized the right to respond. So members of the Saudi Arab-led Gulf Cooperation Council condemned aggression from Iran and emphasized their right to respond after their foreign ministers met via video link. The GCC consists of the UAE, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, and Kuwait, along with Saudi Arabia, and the organization is not just a political and economic bloc, but also a military alliance. All 6 GCC states have been targeted by Iran after attacks that began from the US-Israeli operation on Saturday. These statements said that the Gulf nations will take necessary measures to defend their security and stability to protect their territories, citizens, and residents, including the option of responding to the aggression. Also, we have confirmed reports that 3 US servicemen have been killed and several other injured from this conflict, as confirmed by US Central Command on a statement on Sunday. Several others have sustained minor shrapnel injuries and concussions and are in the process of returning to normal duties. The US military officials did not provide details on how and when the troops lost their lives or sustained injuries. It is the first time the US has sustained casualties have been announced since the strikes launched on Saturday. Additionally, outside of this, a US F-16 was shot down by friendly fire over Kuwait, but both the pilot and the weapons operator safely ejected and were returned to base. So, yeah. Next, I just included this because it was interesting statement that US President Donald Trump has told the New York Times that he sees 3 very good choices for Iran's next leader. I don't know why he thinks he gets a choice in this situation, but just an interesting tidbit to kind of show you where Trump's head's at. Strange. And lastly, the British airbase in Cyprus was also hit by a drone. So Keir Starmer gave a speech last night, and following that, they were hit by an Iranian drone. The UK Air Force has been conducting defensive operations, but they have not participated in any offensive operations against Iran, as announced by the UK Prime Minister. So what? So it still appears likely that this is going to be a short-term campaign, though there is some increasing risk of runaway escalation here, mostly around the deaths of US service personnel. If this continues to happen, it's possible that it'll lead to the US not being able to back down and having to continue their conflict against Iran outside of what is planned to be probably a short-term campaign. There's still limited signs of revolution. This is one of the key things that I'm looking out for at the moment is any signs of the people rising up against the regime. But so far there's been very limited signs. There has been some protests outside of Tehran and some of the smaller cities, but the internal security forces are still functioning to a reasonable level, enough to keep people off the streets, particularly in Tehran. And this is interesting as Israel and the US have specifically been targeting the internal security apparatus of the regime to try and encourage these types of protests and anti-government movements. So that is definitely one to keep an eye on and something that I'm watching over the coming days. And most important, not most importantly, the people that seem to be having the biggest effect out of this is the GCC states. They're very, as I read out, they're very upset about being targeted and how this is affecting their image on the national stage, international stage. I mean, yeah, I think this is a factor that people didn't really consider is what happens when Iran starts firing indiscriminately towards GCC states, and they just don't seem to be prepared for the situation, and what has actually happened. Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting fallout from this conflict, and I think it'll take a bit of time before they kind of happy with Iran again. So yeah, definitely an interesting takeaway. But that's been this pretty quick intel brief for this morning and what's happening in Iran. I think tomorrow we'll return back to the regular kind of three different stories format and try and have a look at what else is going on around the globe, because there's definitely other things happening. There's a war in Afghan. There's other conflicts. Ukraine hasn't slowed down. Heaps more to talk about. So yeah, anyway, that's been your Intel Brief. I've been your host, Daniel, and I'll see you again tomorrow. See you.